Okay, let's unpack this figure, Otis Carr. This deep dive is focused entirely on him, really. A man back in the 1950s who was absolutely certain he'd invented a working, anti-gravity vehicle, a flying saucer, basically. So our mission today, if you will, is to look at the source material we have and figure out if there's even the slightest, like a tiny iota of truth to these revolutionary claims he was making.
It's such a classic story from that era, isn't it? Cold War tech dreams.
Yeah.
And the historical context is just crucial here. Carr always claimed his design, which he called the OC1, was, well, loosely based on concepts from Nikola Tesla.
Tesla. That always comes up.
Right. Ideas about harnessing atmospheric electricity, that sort of thing.
And here's the thing that grabs you immediately, the paradox. He actually got a U.S. patent 2,912,244, granted in 1959. But, and this is the kicker, the Patent Office didn't classify it as, advanced propulsion or a spacecraft.
Yeah, not at all.
It was officially logged as an amusement device.
An amusement device.
Yeah.
And that designation right there is probably the most fundamental clue we have about what was really going on.
Absolutely.
And it's really important for you, the listener, to understand what getting that patent actually meant, especially back then. The U.S. Patent Office, yeah, they needed detailed drawings, schematics, proof it was original.
Right.
But, and this is critical, they did not require the inventor to actually build it and show it working. Or, prove it didn't violate the known laws of physics. You could patent a perpetual motion machine if the diagrams looked convincing enough.
So the patent tells us he was maybe a clever designer, or at least persistent.
Yeah, clever draftsman, definitely conviction. But it gives us zero proof, absolutely none, that he had actually cracked anti-gravity.
Exactly. So, okay, let's establish who this guy actually was, because the claims were just astronomical. Otis Carr. He was a real person, active right during the peak of America's UFO craze. The late 40s, 50s, post-Roswell, everyone was seeing saucers.
Oh, he was very active. And the OC1 wasn't just pitched as a vehicle. It was like a miracle machine. The sources we have show he claimed it would run on what he called free energy.
The free energy trope.
Yep, supposedly drawing power right from the atmosphere's electrical field. And the specs he was throwing around, just unbelievable. He promised trips to the moon in about 5 hours.
5 hours.
Can you imagine? Pitched as this revolutionary, totally non-polluting interstellar commuter craft.
Wow. Okay, so that puts him squarely at the intersection of, I guess, wild technological optimism and, fringe science. So he had these huge claims. He had a patent for a fairground ride, basically.
Yep.
But what did the patent itself actually describe? Was it just some kind of fancy carousel?
Well, the design itself was interesting, and that's where you see the connection to those more fringe Tesla ideas, maybe a bit clearer.
Yeah.
According to the patent drawings, the OC1 was circular, naturally, like the saucers in the news, and it featured these counter-rotating masses, big flywheels or maybe electromagnets, spinning in opposite directions.
Counter-rotation. Okay.
Yeah, and these were supposed to create some kind of special electromagnetic field. The rotation was key. You see this geometry pop up a lot in fringe theories, this idea that if you combine fast rotation with the right kind of electromagnetic fields, you can somehow, cancel gravity or interact with it.
But still, the patent office, the supposed gatekeepers of actual innovation, they looked at spinning parts and basically said, looks like fun at the fair.
Pretty much. And that forces the conversation away from the physics, which clearly wasn't there, towards the sociology. If the technical promise was basically nil, and the legal reality of the patent was, frankly, pretty damning, you have to ask, why did he persist? Was this just pure calculated fraud, or was something else going on?
Yeah, what was driving him?
Well, it's rarely just one single thing, is it?
Yeah.
Which is why we need to sort of dissect his potential mindset. It was absolutely opportunistic, you have to say that. The late 40s and 50s, that was like an investor's dream for anything promising shortcuts.
Especially tech shortcuts.
Exactly. If you stood up and claimed you had the secret to the flying saucer mystery, you were guaranteed attention. Media coverage, definitely. And crucially, money. Venture capital from folks who maybe didn't have a technical background but had tons of enthusiasm, maybe some cash to burn.
Okay, so let's break down the sort of spectrum of motivations we could piece together from the sources for why Carr made these incredibly bold statements. We kind of identified 4 main possibilities, ranging from, let's say, genuine self-deception all the way to just calculated showmanship. Maybe let's start with the one that gives him the most benefit of the doubt.
Okay, that would be misinterpretation. Carr might have genuinely truly believed he was onto something revolutionary. He clearly had this powerful vision, intense conviction. You see that in the accounts. Maybe he was just really dedicated amateur inventor, but lacked the deep physics and engineering background to properly test his ideas.
So passion without the rigor.
Precisely. He had the passion, but maybe every time an experiment did something slightly unexpected, he jumped straight to, aha, anti-gravity, instead of, methodically checking for simpler explanations,
Yeah.
like basic mechanics or electrical effects.
Okay, so if he was genuinely convinced, maybe just mistaken, that's quite different from our second possibility, which is much more cynical. Showmanship and opportunism.
Right. And that perspective sees Carr primarily as a performer, a showman. He understood the times, the cultural moment. He knew how to leverage that intense public fascination with UFOs to get funding. Sources suggest he went on these national tours, he staged big promotional events, made ever grander promises, all keeping the money flowing, whether the OC-1 ever actually, got off the ground or not.
So the machine itself became secondary to the story, the myth he was building.
You could certainly argue that. The myth was that the product he was selling.
Okay, the third possibility. This one, for me, is maybe the most scientifically intriguing because it leaves open a tiny sliver of maybe technical possibility, however small. That's the idea of partial truth, or maybe discovering unusual effects.
Yeah, this is where we try to look past the huge claims about interstellar travel and focus just on the mechanics of his design for a second. Those rapidly counter-rotating flywheels. It's possible that during all his tinkering and experimenting, Carr accidentally stumbled onto something a bit weird, something genuinely anomalous related to intense rotation in magnetic fields.
Like what, for example?
Well, maybe he observed a really strong gyroscopic effect, like precession, that when he tested it on a small scale, it momentarily reduced the pressure on a scale or created a weird instability he didn't understand.
Ah, okay. So he sees an effect that a trained engineer would just go, oh yeah, that's gyroscopic precession. But Carr, without that background, thinks this is it, the first step to beating gravity.
Exactly that. Or think about the electrical side. Rapid rotation of large conductors can generate unexpected static discharges, or maybe slight measurable anomalies in the surrounding electromagnetic field. If he saw any of those unpredicted side effects, a weird vibration, an unexpected spark, a strange reading on a meter, and interpreted that as the initial breakthrough for field propulsion.
It would just feed his existing belief.
Totally. It would confirm his conviction that he'd found some kind of Tesla-esque secret. He's mistaking an electromagnetic side effect for the dawn of a whole new age of physics.
Okay. And the final motivation we identified kind of leaves the workshop entirely and goes purely into the mind.
Right, that's psychological projection. This idea suggests Carr might have been translating a really intense inner experience, maybe visionary, maybe even spiritual, a deep conviction about how the universe works, or about energy.
And mapping that onto the machine.
Exactly. Projecting that internal feeling directly onto the physical design of the OC-1, he believed so deeply in the possibility of transcendence, of overcoming limits, that the saucer became the physical symbol of that inner belief, almost regardless of whether the actual nuts and bolts could ever work.
Okay, this brings us all back to the core question, the one you, the listener, probably started with. We've got the showmanship, the possible misinterpretation, the cultural context. But if we put all the evidence together, strip away the myth, was there any iota of truth to this central claim? Did he have a working saucer?
Functionally. Based on everything we know about physics, and crucially, based on the outcome of his actual efforts. The answer has to be no. I mean, the most powerful counter-evidence is simply the fact that Otis Carr and his OC-1 ended up as footnotes in the history of fringe ideas.
Right. If it worked.
If he had actually developed a true, working interstellar craft using free energy, capable of getting to the moon in 5 hours, he wouldn't have just faded away. That would have triggered a scientific revolution unlike anything in human history, overnight. The simple reality is the machine just didn't work. It couldn't have.
So the truth, if we're going to find any, isn't in the engine bay. It has to be somewhere else. In the idea itself, maybe. The practical physics for anti-gravity or harnessing free energy the way he described, that was clearly missing. But he definitely tapped into something powerful, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He really did. The truth of Otis Carr, I think, lies more on the level of cultural resonance, vision, imagination. His work still holds some meaning for us today, not because the machine flew, but because of what that machine represented.
And we can kind of break that representation down into maybe 3 specific symbolic areas. First, you mentioned the timing. His work directly tapped into the cultural dream of the 1950s.
That dream was incredibly potent. You had the post-war boom, the space race just starting to heat up. There was this massive collective yearning to get off Earth, combined with this growing anxiety about pollution, about running out of resources. Carr's saucer seemed to promise a clean, instant shortcut to technological transcendence. It was like the perfect fantasy vehicle for that specific moment in time.
Makes sense. Second, the OC-1 itself became this powerful symbolic aspiration.
Yeah, it represented that raw human desire to just break limits, gravity, fuel constraints, the tyranny of distance and speed.
Mm.
His machine, just conceptually, just threw all that out the window. It symbolized this radical leap forward that people desperately wished was possible. He kind of captured the hope that maybe, just maybe, the biggest answers lay outside conventional science.
And finally, that link he claimed back to Tesla, that points to the importance he gave to alternative ideas.
Right. By invoking Tesla, specifically Tesla's later, much more speculative, unproven ideas about energy and resonance, Carr was essentially encouraging people to think radically differently about energy, about propulsion. He spurred this conversation mostly on the fringes, about unconventional approaches. Maybe established science was missing something fundamental. Now, that whole conversation was highly speculative, obviously, but it definitely fueled creative imagination.
It's a really fascinating legacy when you put it all together. A complex mix of what? Entrepreneurial hype,
Yeah.
maybe some visionary delusion,
Could be.
and just a really sharp understanding of what people wanted to believe in the mid-20th century.
I think that sums it up pretty well. That's the final verdict, really. Otis Carr had a powerful vision, no doubt. He convinced investors he got himself a genuine U.S. patent.
For an amusement device.
For an amusement device, let's not forget. He clearly had conviction and some interesting ideas, even if they were scientifically, baseless. His story is this perfect storm, this synthesis of inventive imagination crashing into powerful cultural myth-making. It utterly failed the engineering test, but you could say it passed the cultural test with flying colors for a while.
Yeah, it really leaves us with something quite profound to think about, doesn't it? For you, the listener. Consider that vast, vast gulf between a genuine spark of visionary inspiration, that aha moment when you believe you've cracked anti-gravity, and the immense, painstaking technical material depth required to actually turn that vision into a working reality. The story of Otis Carr, I think, really shows us the incredible, almost unstoppable power of human aspiration, of wanting to reach beyond, even when the machine itself remains stubbornly, firmly chained to the earth.